If I could go back in time and talk to myself on day one of flight training, I'd have a long list of advice. Seriously, when I first stepped into the plane 6 years ago, I had no idea what I was in for. I thought I was going to just learn how to handle the controls and soar through the sky. Dang, was I wrong in the best, craziest ways possible. As a certified flight instructor with 2 years of teaching experience and 6 years of total flying under my belt, I've seen dozens of student pilots struggle with the same things I did. So today, I wanted to share 10 things I wish I knew before I started flight training. These are insights that would have saved me money, stress, and I'd probably have a few more hairs on my head if it wasn't for these. Quick background about me. I did my private pilot training at a small Part 61 flight school, then went through an accelerated program at ATP for my instrument and commercial ratings. And eventually I came back to get my CFI at the local school that I did my private at. I've experienced both worlds, the slower paced, flexible training and the fast track academy style. I've flown high wing Cessnas, low wing Pipers, Cirruses, trained under different instructors, and now I teach students of my own. Trust me, I've seen it all. The eureka moments and the why is this so hard breakdowns. In this video and podcast, I'm counting down the top 10 lessons I really wish someone had told me up front. Some of these tips would have saved me thousands of dollars in countless hours. Others would have saved me from panic attacks or embarrassing moments, like the time that I nervously said good morning to an air traffic controller at 10 p.m. And a few of these might have even made me a better pilot faster if I'd known them from the start. Whether you're just thinking about flight training or you're already a student pilot slogging through those lessons, stick around. We're going to talk about everything from money and why you'll need more than you think, to fear and doubt and how every pilot experiences them, to learning plateaus, those frustrating phases where you feel stuck, and a whole lot more. I guarantee you'll find these insights relatable and super useful. By the time we get to number 1, you'll have a clear idea of what to expect and how to crush it in your own flight training journey. Oh, and since this is for both YouTube and podcast listeners, if you're watching on YouTube, please do me a favor and consider hitting the like button and subscribing. And if you're listening to the podcast, follow the show and leave a quick rating if you can. This is by far the best way to tell these algorithms to show this video to new people so we can help them out too. All right, pre-flight briefing done. Let's dive into the 10 things that I wish I knew before I started flight training. Countdown style. Starting with number 10. Number 10, it's not just a hobby, it's a lifestyle. Aviation will take over your life. When I began flying, I thought flying would be a cool hobby I did on weekends. Little did I know it would slowly take over every aspect of my life, in a mostly good way. Aviation isn't just an activity, it's a lifestyle and a mindset. Once you start flight training, you might find yourself turning into that plane person. You know, the one who's always talking about airplanes, even to friends and family who have no clue what you're saying. One big change? You'll become a bit of a weather nerd. I certainly did. Before I started flying, I barely even checked the weather forecast. After a few lessons, though, I was obsessively refreshing weather apps, checking METARs and TAFs, which are fancy aviation weather reports, every single morning, afternoon, and night. Suddenly, terms like ceiling, visibility, and crosswind became vital to my everyday life. I'd be sitting outside, eyeing the wind gust, thinking, could I land in this? Your non-pilot friends might give you weird looks because they won't understand a word, but this becomes your new normal. And let's talk about free time. Say goodbye to it. Okay, not all of it, but a chunk. Flight training has a way of seeping beyond the scheduled lessons. You'll catch yourself watching YouTube videos about flying at 1 a.m., like right now if it's 1 a.m., or reading your aviation textbook instead of that book on your nightstand. I used to spend my lunch breaks chair flying, literally sitting in a chair, hands out like I'm holding a yoke, muttering radio calls to myself like a crazy person. Hopefully no one from my old job saw that. The point is, you'll get hooked. Aviation has its own language, community, and humor, and before you know it, you're in on the joke. Now, this all sounds a bit comical, and it is, but there's a serious upside. The aviation lifestyle means you're always learning and always engaged. You start seeing the world through a pilot's eyes. That sky above isn't just pretty clouds anymore. It's scattered cumulus at 4,000 feet, likely bumpy up there. A road trip isn't just long hours in a car, it's scoping out flat fields just in case you had to make an emergency landing. The pilot brain never fully switches off. Importantly, you also join a community. Pilots are a tight-knit group. Whether it's local pilots at your airport, online forums, or random people you meet in an FBO lounge, you'll swap stories, share tips, maybe gripe about the price of avgas. It's like entering a secret club where everyone is passionate about the same thing. As a new student pilot, I was amazed how welcoming and helpful other pilots were, offering advice, encouragement, or just a hearty keep at it when I was down. So the thing I wish I knew here is be prepared for aviation to become a big part of your identity. If you truly catch the flying bug, and fair warning, you probably will, it's not something you clock out of when the lesson is over. And that's okay. Embrace it. Just maybe give your non-pilot friends and family a break by balancing your conversation topics. Unless you're actively trying to recruit them into flying too, which, let's be honest, you probably will. The aviation lifestyle is incredibly rewarding. It makes life an adventure. But I wish I'd known ahead of time that starting flight training was like adopting a very demanding but lovable new pet. It needs attention every day, not just on the weekends. And hey, if you are already at the point where you're watching airplane videos late at night and saying stand by in casual conversation, let me know in the comments what aspects have carried over to your everyday life. All right. Number 9, plan for the costs and get your medical early. I cannot stress this enough. Flight training is expensive and often more expensive than you initially expect. When I first started, I naively thought, all right, FAA says minimum 40 hours to get a private pilot's license. I'll aim for that and be done. Easy peasy. In reality, most people need a lot more flight time to be ready for the check ride. In fact, the national average is around 60 to 75 hours of flight training before earning a private pilot certificate. Think about that. The FAA minimum is 40 hours, but hardly anyone finishes that fast. Most of us take nearly double. I ended up completing my PPL in about 65 hours, which is pretty typical. And more hours in the plane means more money spent. So how much money are we talking? Well, it varies a ton based on where you train, what you fly, fuel costs, etc. But generally in the US, you're looking at somewhere between $12,000 to $20,000 or even more to get your private pilot's license. I remember thinking I could do it for about $10K by being super efficient. Yeah, that didn't happen. There are always extra costs, headset, books, exam fees, maybe an iPad for charts, and definitely more flight hours than you budgeted. One big surprise for me was retraining time. For instance, if weather or scheduling delays cause a gap in your training, you might need a refresher flight or two to knock off the rust, which, cha-ching, costs more. And if, like many people, you end up needing a few extra lessons to nail landings or to feel confident for that check ride, that's more money too. The key lesson? Budget more time and money than the bare minimum. I wish someone had told me to say budget 1.5 times the minimum hours. If you expect to need 60 hours and plan finances for that, you won't be heartbroken or broke when 40 hours comes and goes and you're not check ride ready. In fact, the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association, or AOPA, found that 80% of student pilots drop out before getting their license. And a huge reason for that is running out of time or money. I was determined to not be in that 80%, so I started treating my flight training fund seriously, cutting unnecessary expenses, maybe eating more ramen noodles than I'd like to admit, just to keep flying. Now, getting your FAA medical certificate. This is a big one that often gets overlooked before you even start, or as early as possible, make sure you can pass the required medical exam. I've seen it happen. Someone pours thousands of dollars into training and then discovers they can't pass the medical due to an underlying health issue. It's rare, but imagine the heartbreak for your private pilot you need at least a third-class medical. Or you could go the sport pilot route with no medical, but that's a conversation for a different video. The exam checks everything from your vision to your hearing and just overall general health. It's usually straightforward, but if there are any concerns, say you have a condition or you're on a medication that the FAA flags, you want to address that before you've spent a bunch of money on lessons. I scheduled my medical right after my first few lessons just to get it done. In my case, everything was fine, but I was anxious waiting for the results. I had this random worry like, well, what if I'm colorblind and never knew? Since pilots need to distinguish red and green for night flying and light signals. Turns out, I wasn't colorblind. I was just overthinking. But some of my buddies discovered issues like slightly high blood pressure or needed an extra eye exam. They got through it, but it delayed their training a bit. Moral of the story, knock out your medical exam early so it's not a surprise later. Another thing to plan for, financing and scheduling. If you can, set aside a dedicated chunk of money for flying so you're not scraping together cash each time. Some schools offer bulk hour purchase discounts or financing programs. Just be careful and read the fine print. For example, during my instrument training at ATP, the program cost was packaged quite high, but it included almost everything in a lump sum. That was scary upfront, but the upside was I wasn't constantly worrying about hourly costs. I could focus on learning. At a local school, you might pay as you go. Either way, have a game plan. Nothing is worse than pausing training for months because money ran out. You lose momentum and skills in the interim, which can end up costing more to regain. Time is money too in flying. Try to allocate regular time for lessons in your schedule. If you only fly once a month due to a busy schedule, you're going to spend a lot of that lesson relearning stuff. Paying to relearn? I know life, work, family, all that makes scheduling tough. Even if it's just one slot a week you carve out for sure, make it as sacred as possible. At one point, I was working full-time and doing flight training. I literally treated my 2 lessons a week as immovable meetings on my calendar. My friends would ask, hey, are you free on Tuesday evening? Nope, sorry, I have a flight. They typically thought I meant that I was flying on an airline. They didn't need to know that it was a flight around the area meeting with my instructor. To wrap up this point, expect flight training to dent your wallet and your calendar. Prepare for it. Save up a bit more than you think you need. Get that medical exam early. By setting yourself up financially and logistically, you'll reduce a huge chunk of stress. Then you can focus on flying instead of fretting about dollars or doctor's exams. Trust me, knowing you have the resources lined up feels like a huge weight lifted off of your shoulders. Number 8, ground school and self-study are just as important as flying. I'll be the first one to admit, when I started, I was all about the airplane. I thought the real learning only happened at 3,500 feet with my hands on the yoke. But let me tell you, I wish I knew how crucial the ground school portion was going to be. Flying is the flashy part, sure, but the knowledge that supports it, regulations, weather theory, navigation, aerodynamics, that's the foundation. Ignoring the book work is a mistake I made early on, and it came back to bite me. Not all training happens in the air. A lot of learning and preparation happens on the ground, from pre-flight checks to studying. Early in my training, I was so eager to fly that I skimmed through the required reading and ground lessons. I figured, I'll pick it up as we go. Well, flash forward to me blankly staring at a sectional chart, which is an aviation map, during a ground briefing, realizing I had no idea how to pinpoint our location or what most of the symbols meant. My instructor kind of gave me that look that kindly suggested I spend more time with my nose in the book. He was right. Flying the plane is one thing, but understanding what you're doing and why, that comes from studying. One eye-opener was when I started preparing for the FAA knowledge test, the written exam every pilot has to pass. I had to buckle down and learn a ton of information, how engines work, weather patterns, FAA regulations, navigation logs, you name it. I thought, why do I need to know all this stuff? I just want to fly. But once I dove in, I realized how this knowledge actually made me a better, safer pilot in the plane. For example, learning about weather not only helped me pass a test, it helped me make real-world decisions, like recognizing when fog might form, or why it gets so bumpy on a hot afternoon. soon. Understanding aerodynamics and weight and balance keeps you from doing something dumb like loading a plane outside of its limits. In short, the ground knowledge isn't just trivia, it's there to keep you safe and make you effective. Self-study and practice on the ground can also save you a ton of money and time in the air. Here's a pro tip I learned. Chair fly your maneuvers and flights. Chair flying means mentally running through a flight or maneuver on the ground. Literally sit in a chair or couch or wherever. Close your eyes and visualize flipping the switches, saying the radio calls, pushing the throttle in, the whole sequence. It feels silly at first, but it's golden. By the time you hop in the plane, you're not fumbling around as much because you rehearsed it. I used to talk through entire flights in my living room. My dog thought I was a little nuts, but my landings definitely improved after I started doing approach briefings to my sofa. Another tip, use a home flight simulator if you can. Microsoft Flight Sim is even on Xbox, or even the most basic programs on a computer. During my instrument training, flying Microsoft Flight Sim or X-Plane at home to practice procedures was a game changer. I could practice tuning radios, shooting approaches, holding patterns, all without burning $250 an hour in a real plane. It's obviously not a complete substitute. The real motion, the feel, the stress of real flying is different. But for procedural stuff and muscle memory, it's fantastic. Even for VFR training, a sim can help you practice navigation or get comfy with the instrument panel layout. Don't overlook online ground school courses or resources either. There are great programs and YouTube channels out there that teach you everything from basic aerodynamics to how to prepare for your check ride oral exam. Some of my favorites included free YouTube series and paid courses like Sporties. They present info in a digestible way. If reading the FAA handbook feels like chewing cardboard, it can be a little bit dry. Trust me. Supplement it with video tutorials or interactive quizzes on Quizlet. The goal is to understand the material, not just memorize the answers. One of the things I emphasize now as a CFI is come prepared for each lesson. That hour of flying you have scheduled, to get the most out of it, you should probably spend at least another hour or two in preparation reading about the maneuvers that you're going to do, studying the airspace you'll fly in, reviewing the checklists, etc. A good rule of thumb I learned is for about every hour you spend in the air, expect to spend 2 hours on the ground studying. When I first heard that, I thought it was overkill, but it's absolutely true, especially when you're new. If you've studied, say, slow flight and stalls ahead of time, then when your instructor demonstrates it in the airplane, it clicks much faster. You're not wasting flight time learning the absolute basics of the maneuver. You did some of that on the ground for free or cheap. Flight time can then be used to practice and refine, which is what it should be for. I also wish I had known to ask more questions on the ground. Sometimes I'd be in a lesson nodding along like I understood everything, when in reality I was totally lost about, say, how the magnetic compass was acting. I was shy or didn't want to look dumb, so I kept quiet. Big mistake. Instructors actually love when you ask questions during the ground time because that shows that you care and want to learn. If something doesn't make sense, speak up. There's no such thing as a stupid question in flight training. If you don't clarify it on the ground, it will come back to haunt you in the air at the worst time. Case in point, not fully understanding crosswind correction techniques on the ground means you might be very confused when a gusty crosswind is actually pushing you towards the edge of the runway on landing. Ask me how I know. Finally, let's not forget the pre-flight and post-flight briefings as part of the ground training. These briefings with your instructor are golden opportunities. Before the flight, they lay out what you'll do, so pay attention. It's literally the game plan. After the flight debriefing, what went right or wrong helps cement lessons. Early on, I used to just mentally check out once the engine was off, like, whew, lesson over. But my instructor would stop me and review things while it was fresh. Remember when I pulled the power of beam the numbers? What could you have done better in your glide? That reflection helped me improve next time. Now, as an instructor, I make sure to debrief my students thoroughly, and I encourage them to take notes. In summary, don't skimp on the ground training, embrace it. The more solid your knowledge and preparation, the smoother and cheaper your actual flights will be. I wish I had fully appreciated this balance from day one. It would have saved me some frustration and a few extra hours of figuring things out in the cockpit that I could have mastered easily on the ground. Number 7, consistency is key. Fly often and stay on schedule. If there's one thing that can dramatically influence your success and cost in flight training, it's consistency. I wish I knew earlier how crucial it was to train regularly and keep up a good rhythm. Picture this, me as a fresh student pilot, all gung-ho. I flew twice a week for a month and made great progress. Well, then life happened, work got busy, weather was lousy for a couple weeks, and I took a 3-week break. When I came back, I felt like I had forgotten half of what I had learned. My landings were sloppy again, my confidence took a hit, and I basically had to redo a lesson or two just to get back to where I was. It was demoralizing and expensive paying to relearn stuff. The aviation skills you're building are very much use it or lose it, especially in the beginning. Muscle memory in flying is huge. Things like sight picture for landing, the coordination for turns, the flows for checklists. These fade if you step away for too long. Consistency keeps those neural pathways fresh. Ever notice how career student pilots, the ones who train intensively like at an academy or just full time, can finish in the minimum time? It's not that they're all geniuses, it's because they're flying consistently. Sometimes every day. Momentum is powerful. Now, not everyone can train full time. I certainly didn't do all my training that way. Real life was in session. But even if you're part-time, set a realistic training frequency and stick to it. Maybe it's twice a week, maybe once a week if that's all that time allows. But try not to have big gaps. I recommend aiming for at least one flight 7 to 10 days minimum. If you go past 2 weeks without flying, you'll likely spend part of the next lesson knocking off rust. One instructor told me early on, flying is like a dance. If you don't practice the steps often, you're going to step on some toes when you jump back in. In other words, you get clumsy again. Consistency isn't just about the flying part either. It's also about studying and engagement. This ties back to point number 8. I found that during periods where I couldn't fly as often, I at least tried to study or chair fly regularly to keep my head in the game. For example, a week of bad weather grounded me. I'd use that time to read ahead in the textbook or practice flight simulator approaches. This kept my mind in pilot mode, so when I got back in the airplane, it wasn't as jarring. Another angle to consistency is sticking to a syllabus or plan. If you're at a Part 141 school or structured program like ATP, they often have a set syllabus with lesson plans that build on each other day by day. In Part 61, where training is more flexible, training might be more on you and your instructor to keep things on track. I wish I knew to proactively discuss a training plan with my instructor early. We actually sat down and roughly mapped out the weeks ahead. Next week, we'll do stalls and ground reference maneuvers. Week after, your first solo might happen if all goes well. Having that plan helped me prepare, and it also made me accountable to keep up pace. Let's talk about scheduling challenges. Whether aircraft maintenance, personal conflicts, these will happen and disrupt your flow. The trick here is to reschedule immediately and keep priorities. I made it a habit that if a lesson got canceled for any reason, I'd pull out my phone and rebook the next one on the spot. No, I'll get around to it. This prevented those cancellations from turning into long gaps. It can be frustrating, like 3 lessons in a row being canceled for rain. You start feeling the universe is against you. But in those slumps, don't lose momentum. Double down on something else aviator-y. Maybe take an extra ground lesson, do an online course, or sit in on a friend's lesson if possible. I've even gone to the airport just to hang around and talk to pilots on a canceled flight day. It keeps the motivation up. Consistency also feeds into habits and discipline. By training regularly, you develop routines. Pre-flight inspections become second nature. The flow of getting the weather briefing and weight and balance calculations, etc., becomes routine. If you spread things out too much, each time it's like reinventing the wheel. One of the hardest stretches for me was right before my cross-country solo flights. Bad weather and work made my training sporadic. Every time I flew, it felt like I had to regain my confidence to solo again. Once I recognized this, I adjusted. I made smaller, frequent flights, even if it was just practicing at the airport, until I was sharp and comfortable. Then I did the big solo cross countries, and that felt great because I was in my groove. If you're listening and thinking, well, I can't afford to fly frequently, I hear you. Flying can often strain the budget. Back to point 9. Point 9 is always lurking. Here's a tip. During training, budget in a way that allows spurts of frequency. Instead of 1 flight a week for 10 weeks, save up to do 2 flights a week for 5 weeks. That condensed training keeps skills tighter. Also, consider short flights, but more often. A 1-hour flight twice a week is going to be more effective for learning than a single 1.4-hour flight once a week, because you get 2 takeoffs and landings sessions, 2 separate reinforcement events. You might cover less each individual flight, but you'll retain more by the next one. Accountability helps too. If you have a fellow student pilot friend, keep each other on track. I had a buddy who started about the same time, and we'd text each other about our progress. If one of us hadn't flown in a while, the other would nag and say, "Hey man, get back up there before you forget how to land." Friendly peer pressure can actually be a motivator. One more thing, consistent doesn't mean rushed. There's a balance. Don't schedule so much that you're burnt out or not digesting lessons properly. In the early stages, if you try to fly 4 days in a row like I did, you'd think you'd progress faster, but by the 4th day, you're just exhausted and you actually perform worse. So find a suitable rhythm. Consistent and fresh is the goal. In essence, treat flight training a bit like a musical instrument or a sport. Regular practice beats occasional cramming. You wouldn't expect to master guitar by practicing once a month, and you wouldn't train for a marathon by running sporadically. Same with flying. Keep the cadence and you'll see steady improvement. I wish I understood just how much these long breaks would set me back. I would have organized my life to minimize them better from the start. Number 6, the instructor matters. Find a CFI you click with and don't be afraid to speak up. Here's something that took me a while to grasp. The quality of your flight instructor and your relationship with them can make or break your training experience. When you start out, you might not realize you have a choice. I don't think I did at first. I thought, this is the instructor assigned to me, I guess I'm sticking with them no matter what. Sometimes that works out great. Other times, not so much. I got really lucky with my first instructor for my private. We clicked right away. He was patient where I needed patience and a drill sergeant where I needed a kick in the butt. It was a good balance for me. Fast forward to my training at ATP, that program was accelerated and I actually went through a couple of instructors. One left to go to the airlines mid-training, which is a common thing in these big academies. The second instructor I had, well, our personalities just didn't mesh well. He was extremely fast-paced and assumed that I understood things I definitely did not yet understand. I was struggling, but afraid to say anything at first. I mean, he was the expert, right? I ended up bottling up confusion for a while, which only hurt me. I fell behind on some concepts and had a minor setback on a stage check because of it. The lesson I wish I'd known, it's okay to speak up, ask questions, or even request a different instructor if you truly feel like you're not learning well from your current one. Flight training is not like grade school where you're stuck with whatever teacher you get. You're actually a paying customer or paying student, and you have a say. Now, I'm not saying bail out on your instructor on the first tough critique. Sometimes they challenge you for your own good. But if you consistently feel uncomfortable, disrespected, or just not understood, it's worth addressing. Communication is huge. If something isn't clicking, tell your instructor. A good CFI will adapt their style to help you. As a CFI now, I always appreciate when a student says, "Hey, I'm not getting this. Can we try explaining it differently?" That's way better than them just pretending and me assuming all is well until it blows up later. Remember, instructors aren't mind readers. Early in my training, I thought if I was quiet, the instructor would know I was lost. Nope. They assumed I was fine and kept just plowing ahead. Learned that one the hard way during steep turns. I had no idea how to do the maneuver, but said nothing and completely butchered it. My instructor asked me, "Why didn't you tell me you were unsure?" Which is a good question. Also, every instructor has a different style and temperament. Some are old school and super strict. Some are laid back. Some talk a lot. Some barely talk. We call those the scary quiet ones. It's worth finding someone whose style matches your learning preference. If you need someone to hold your hand a bit through landings, that's fine. Find an instructor known for being nurturing. If you thrive under pressure, maybe a tough love instructor is actually good for you. My friend had an instructor for his CFI training who was ex-military. He'd bark feedback at him in the plane. At first, he was rattled, but then realized that this guy was prepping him to be sharp and handle stress, and he appreciated it. But that style might have crushed a more timid student. So it's different from individual to individual. What if you're at a small school with only 1 or 2 instructors, or you feel awkward asking for someone else? It can be delicate, but remember, you are the client. You can approach the owner or chief pilot and politely say, "I feel like I might learn better with a different instructor. Could I try to fly with so-and-so?" You can frame it as a scheduling thing or wanting to experience different styles. Most schools won't take it personally. In fact, a good school will want to pair you with someone that works for you so that you succeed. Another scenario, your instructor is great, life happens. Maybe they leave or go on a long vacation or get hired by an airline in the middle of your training. Pilot turnover is real. If that happens, don't panic. It's frustrating to switch, I know. I had to switch twice, and each time I was worried, I have to get used to a whole new person, catch them up on my progress, etc. But in hindsight, flying with multiple instructors made me a more adaptable pilot. Each one taught me something different. For example, one instructor was a stickler for checklist discipline. Another was all about stick and rudder finesse. Combining their teachings gave me a well-rounded skill set. So if you're forced to change CFIs, see it as an opportunity to learn from someone new. Still, if you really gel with one, maybe plan your training schedule to maximize time with them before they might leave. Let's talk student-instructor dynamics. Respect and trust are key. You need to trust that your instructor won't let you get into unsafe situations, at least not without teaching you how to get out. I always trusted mine, which helped me push my boundaries. Conversely, they need to trust you. Trust that you're prepared, that you're listening to feedback, that you won't freak out and stop flying when things get challenging. Build that trust by being honest and putting in effort. I found that by lesson 4 or 5, I got comfortable enough to say, I'm really nervous about this maneuver. Or, can we review that concept from last time? I'm still a little bit shaky on it. That honesty allowed my instructor to target my weak spots better. One thing that I wish I had done sooner is sit down for a frank talk about progress after a handful of lessons. I recommend asking your CFI, how do you think that I am doing? Is there anything I should focus on more? This opens the door for valuable feedback. Sometimes they might just say, you're doing fine, keep it up. Other times you might learn something like, well, your rudder control is lacking. Let's emphasize that. That happened to me at around my 10th hour. My instructor said I had a tendency to be a bit rough on the controls or over controlling. I didn't even realize it. Once he pointed it out though, we did some extra focus on finesse and it made a huge difference, especially for landings. If I hadn't asked, he might have eventually told me, but possibly later down the road. Finally, remember that instructors are people too. Shock, I know. They have good days and bad days. Cut them a little slack if they seem off, but also don't hesitate to remind them of your needs. A simple, hey, can we go over the plan one more time before we start the engine? If they forgot to do a briefing, is totally fine. As a student, I was sometimes too shy to ask for what I needed. As an instructor now, I want my students to tell me if I forgot to explain something or if they prefer a different approach. It makes me better at my job. To sum it up, find a CFI you click with, communicate openly, and take charge of your learning. Switching instructors or speaking up isn't confrontational, it's professional. After all, you're entrusting this person with your safety and your aviation dreams. It has to be a partnership. When it works, you'll not only learn faster, but you'll probably gain a lifelong mentor and friend in the process. I know I have to shout out my first CFI, who I still bug with questions years later. Number 5, progress isn't linear. Everyone learns at their own pace. This one was a tough pill for me to swallow. Learning to fly is full of ups and downs, and no two pilot journeys are the same. I really wish I knew from the start that it's perfectly normal to hit plateaus and have bad days, and sometimes feel like you're even going backwards. And equally, it's normal for your progress to look different from the student in the next plane over. When I began, I had a rough timeline in my head. Maybe from reading too many online forums. Well, I'll solo by 15 hours, get my license by 50 hours in 3 months. Easy. Reality check. I soloed closer to 40 hours, finished at around 65 hours, and it took me about 6 months due to weather and scheduling. At first, I felt disappointed in myself for not hitting those arbitrary milestones. Why? Well, because I was comparing myself to others, or to some big ideal picture I read online. Big mistake. Aviation isn't a race, it's a personal journey. Let's talk about plateaus. You'll likely experience phases where you seem to stall out. No pun intended. For me, it was mastering landings. Oh man, do I remember learning how to land. I hit a stretch where I just couldn't get them right. One week, I nailed a few and was over the moon, and literally the next lesson, I was bouncing down the runway like a kangaroo, thinking I had completely lost it. I remember remember going home that day thinking, maybe I'm not cut out for this. I'll never land consistently. If only I knew how common this is. Many student pilots struggle with landings or some other particular skill, maybe radios or navigation or steep turns. It's like your brain needs extra time to process and internalize that skill, and it often happens in spurts. Nothing. Then boom, it clicks. There's this concept in learning called the learning plateau, and then breakthroughs. You might make quick progress initially, honeymoon phase, where every flight you achieve something like first takeoff, first stall, etc. Then you hit an intermediate stage where improvements are harder to see. That's when a lot of people get frustrated. I know I sure did. But typically if you push through, keep practicing, maybe try a different technique, you suddenly leap to the next level. I vividly recall the session where landings finally clicked for me. We had been at it for days, and then one evening something just felt different. I could predict the flare, control the float, and gently put the wheels on the pavement with that satisfying chirp. I floated off the runway, figuratively. That day, after weeks of plateau, the dam broke and progress flowed again. Now, about everyone learning at their own pace, this is so important. Do not gauge your success by how fast or slow others are moving. I had peers at my school who soloed at 10 hours, good for them, and others who took 50, but they became excellent pilots too. Some finished their private in a month of intensive training, others took 2 years part-time. It's fine. Life circumstances, learning styles, even age or prior experience, like simulator hours, can affect the pace. I was guilty of looking at a buddy who seemed to grasp things faster, and I was feeling inferior. Meanwhile, I discovered he had grown up flying with his dad, so he had a head start on radio work and just air knowledge. Once I realized that, I stopped unfairly comparing myself and cut myself some slack. This was a huge revelation. Struggling in training doesn't predict the kind of pilot you'll be. Some people who struggle more initially end up being very safe pilots because they had to work so hard to get there. If you find one aspect super challenging, it might mean you'll gain a deeper understanding as you overcome it. For example, I had a student who fought tooth and nail with landings. It didn't come naturally at all, but he persisted, tried different methods, and eventually it clicked. Because it was hard-won knowledge, he became extremely precise with them. Better than those who it came easy. Another aspect, setbacks happen. You might bust a stage check or fail a written or even fail the big check ride. It's not the end of the world, though it might feel like it in the moment. A lot of fantastic pilots have failed a check ride or two in their journey. Approximately 20 to 25% of private pilot applicants fail on their first try, so you wouldn't be alone. I personally have failed 2 check rides. I know now that it doesn't mean that I'm a bad pilot. It means I had an off day or needed a bit more practice on something. You train more and go at it again. That's it. I wish I knew not to put so much pressure on myself that everything had to be perfect. Aim for excellence, yes, but accept that perfection is unrealistic. A great piece of advice that I got from my mentor: run your own race. In aviation, this means focus on your own learning path. Keep track of your personal improvements. Maybe last week you were shaky on stall recoveries, and this week you nailed them. That's progress for you, irrespective of others. Celebrate those wins. I used to keep a little journal where after each lesson, I'd jot down what I improved on and what I needed to work on. Flipping back through it, it was encouraging. I could actually see how far I'd come, even if day to day it felt slow. As an instructor, I see this play out all the time. One student will take forever to grasp ground reference maneuvers, but breeze through instrument scans. Another might be the exact opposite. Each will worry they're slow in the area they struggle with. I reassure them, everyone has strong and weak points. We'll take the time needed on the weak ones. It's not a race to check the boxes, it's about truly getting it so you're safe and competent. So if you're feeling like you're not progressing, or you're the slow one in your flight school, give yourself a break. Consistency, as we discussed in number 7, plus persistence will get you there. The tortoise can beat the hare in flying because the tortoise doesn't give up and will eventually finish, whereas the hare that burns out or quits won't. Also, don't be afraid to adjust your training methods if you hit a wall. well. Sometimes just flying with a different instructor for one lesson can break a plateau, a fresh perspective, or using a sim to practice that thing that you struggle with, or even taking a short break if you're really frustrated. Come back with a clear head. I once had to take a week off to clear my frustrations after a really bad flight. I returned more relaxed and then smoothed things out. Remember, aviation is a continuous learning process. That thing will come again at number one. You're never truly done learning even after the license. So in the grand scheme of things, whether you finish your private in 50 hours or 80 hours, doesn't matter. What matters is you learned what you needed to be a safe pilot. If past me had understood that progress is not linear and not to compare myself to others, I would have saved a lot of self-doubt. So I'm telling you now, be patient with yourself. You will get it with dedication. Trust me. It's magic and totally worth the struggle. Number 4, you will be scared and nervous, and that's normal. Okay, real talk. At some point in your flight training, you are going to be scared, anxious, or at least really darn nervous, and that is 100% normal. I wish someone had told me earlier that even the best pilots have moments of fear or self-doubt, especially when they're learning. I would have felt a lot less like an imposter when I was shaking in my boots before my first solo. Let's start with the obvious one. The first time you fly the airplane alone, aka the first solo. Leading up to my solo, I remember a particular lesson where my instructor hopped out of the plane for me to do some takeoffs and landings by myself. I was excited, but as soon as the airplane door closed and I was truly alone for the first time, a wave of my panic hit me. My inner monologue, oh my god, I'm the only one in here. Am I really ready for this? What if I screw up? My heart was pounding so hard I thought I could hear it in my headset. But here's the thing, this reaction is common. Instructors don't send you solo until they're confident in you. So I had to remind myself, my instructor thinks that I can do this, so I probably can. Sure enough, after a shaky first takeoff and pattern, muscle memory kicked in and I landed safely. Maybe a bit firm, but hey, all that mattered that I was down in one piece. Once I did it, fear turned into the biggest surge of confidence ever. I'm pretty sure I literally screamed, "Woo!" to myself on climb out after that first successful solo landing. It's not just the solo though. There were plenty of other scary moments. The first time I flew in genuine turbulent weather, I thought the wings were going to rip off. They won't. Small planes are tougher than they look, but being tossed around had my stomach in knots. I had to learn to trust my aircraft and my training. Aviate, navigate, communicate. Fly the plane first. Don't panic. Over time, I got used to a little chop, and it barely phases me now, but initially totally unsettling. Another big anxiety for a lot of students is radio communication. Talking to air traffic control, or even a busy local frequency, can be intimidating. Early on, I was terrified of keying the mic. I'd rehearse what I needed to say 10 times in my head and I'd still screw it up. One time, I called ground control saying I was on the wrong taxiway. Whoops. Another time I completely froze and just sat there with for like 5 seconds. Felt like an eternity before spitting out the rest of my request. I thought every pilot listening was laughing at me. They weren't. They've all been there or were too busy to care. If you fear talking on the radios, trust me, that's normal. We all get mic fright until we've done it enough. The remedy is preparation, like writing down what you'll say or using a script and practice. Eventually making radio calls will feel as routine as talking on the phone. Now I sometimes can't shut up on the radio. What a turnaround. Stalls. Let's talk about stalls. The maneuver where you intentionally make the wing stop flying so you can practice recovering from it. The idea of it scared the daylights out of me before I did it first. The first few times practicing stalls, my palms were sweaty and I might have let out a little My palms were sweaty. As the plane started getting mushy and the stall horn blared, this is normal too. It's a strange out of comfort zone thing, but you do it to learn how to recover and to demystify it. The more I practiced, the more I realized a stall, when properly entered and recovered as trained, isn't that bad. The plane doesn't just fall out of the sky like a rock. It sort of mushes and you recover by lowering the nose and adding power. It's over in a couple seconds. Building that trust in yourself and the plane is key. I recall another situation, night flying as a student. The first time I went up at night as a student pilot, everything felt different. and a bit eerie. Depth perception is trickier. The world looks foreign with all the city lights, and the dark can play tricks on your mind. I was on edge that flight more than any daytime flight. I remember nervously asking my instructor, "Are you sure it's okay we can't see the moon tonight?" He chuckled and said, "The plane doesn't care if it's dark. It's the same flying. Just use your instruments, trust them more." That was a lesson in managing discomfort by relying on training and instrument scanning. After a couple of night lessons, I went from nervously gripping the yoke to actually finding night flying peaceful and beautiful. Here's something to keep in mind that I learned. Those butterflies or outright nerves mean you care and understand the gravity of what you're doing. Flying isn't something trivial, it's serious business with real risks. Feeling a healthy sense of fear or caution is what keeps you safe and sharp. Pilots who claim they never get scared, I'd question their self-awareness or judgment. A saying that I love: there are old pilots and there are bold pilots, but there are no old, bold pilots. Meaning if you have zero fear and become reckless, that's dangerous. Some fear is good. It keeps you respectful of weather, of limitations, of emergency procedures. The key is learning to manage fear and not let it paralyze you. How? By training and building experience gradually. Instructors will usually expose you to new challenges in steps. They won't toss you into a 30-knot crosswind or a busy class Bravo airspace on day one. They'll build you up. Each time you conquer a little fear, your comfort zone expands. For me, after surviving and later enjoying moderate turbulence, I wasn't afraid of choppy days anymore. I learned to secure loose items, tighten my seatbelt, and ride it out. After I handled a simulated engine out without freaking out, I felt more confident that if the real thing happened, I could manage. Also, don't be ashamed to voice your fears. Tell your instructor if something is freaking you out. Good instructors will talk you through it or modify the plan to ease you in. For example, if steep turns scare you, maybe start with gentler bank angles and build up. If the idea of instrument flying in clouds makes your heart race, your instructor might do more hood work, wearing the foggles, on a clear day first, so that you trust your instruments before going into real clouds. One more thing, check ride nerves. Almost everyone gets them. The day of my private pilot practical test, I was more nervous than I'd ever been, more than any school exam or job interview. It felt like everything was on the line. The trick I used was to breathe deeply and treat the examiner as just another instructor flight. Chance to show what I know, and if I don't know something, demonstrate I can find it or figure it out safely. Examiners are people too. They're usually not out to fail you. They just want to see you be safe and competent. Understanding that helped me dial down the fear to a manageable level. Though, yeah, I still had sweaty palms on that check ride. I doubt that ever goes away entirely for anyone. In summary, expect to be scared or anxious at various points. It's a natural part of learning to fly. Embrace it as part of the growth process. Each time you work through a fear, you gain confidence and skill, and nothing compares to the pride you'll feel looking back and saying, "Wow, I remember when that used to scare me, and now I'm doing it like it's second nature." That transformation is one of the most empowering parts of flight training. Number 3, there are different paths. Part 61 versus Part 141. Big academies versus local school. Find what works for you. When I first started flying, I didn't realize how many different ways there are to go about flight training. I sort of stumbled into a path, a local flight school, Part 61 for my private pilot's license. Then later, I enrolled in a big academy, ATP for my instrument, my commercial. In hindsight, I wish I knew more about these options before I started, so I could have planned my journey a bit better, or at least not been so surprised by the differences. First, let's decode the jargon. Part 61 versus Part 141. These refer to parts of the U.S. federal aviation regulations that govern flight training. Part 61 is pretty much the standard rules that any certified flight instructor can train you under. It's flexible and allows the instructor to tailor the syllabus to you. Part 141 applies to flight schools that have an FAA-approved curriculum and more structure, typically academies or university programs. Both paths ultimately get you the same FAA certification, but the approach is different. Part 141 flight schools are more highly regulated and regimented. At the end of the day, both paths lead to the same pilot's license, but given your particular situation, one may provide more benefits than the other. My experience. Private pilot under Part 61 at a local school was awesome for flexibility. If I needed extra time on landings, we just did more landings. No biggie, no strict quota to meet before moving on. We could also rearrange lessons due to weather. Example, if it was too cloudy to practice stalls one day, we might do navigation instead. However, the downside is that Part 61 relies heavily on the individual instructor's quality and the student's self-discipline. If you or your instructor aren't organized, you might miss some ground topics or bounce around too much. Fortunately, my instructor had a good plan, so it was fine. For instrument and commercial, I went to ATP, which operates under Part 61, but in a very, very Part 141-like fashion. It's highly structured and accelerated. Essentially, it was a full-time commitment. We flew almost every day. The syllabus was mapped out day by day. The pace was intense. I finished my instrument rating in just a few weeks. That kind of immersion was great for staying in the groove, as we talked about in tip number 7. But it was also stressful. Think of it like boot camp for pilots. You eat, sleep, breathe aviation all day. It pushed me a lot, and there were times that I was overwhelmed by the rapid fire of lessons. I remember doing 2 or 3 flight lessons and a simulator session all in the same day. But the benefit was I progressed quickly, and I was surrounded by peers doing the same thing, which was motivating. One major difference I found: environment and support. At the local Part 61 school, it was a small community airport vibe. A few instructors and students, more one-on-one mentorship. Also, if weather was bad, training just paused. We didn't really do a lot of ground school classes or sims unless I scheduled separately. At ATP, if the weather was bad, they had us in the simulator, or they had us doing grounds. The training kept moving. Also, at the big academy, I had a primary instructor, but also interacted with stage-checked instructors and others. So I got a mix of perspectives, which was cool, though sometimes confusing if one person taught something slightly different than another. You learn to adapt. Cost and scheduling differences. Generally, big academy programs might have a higher upfront cost, but they often quote a more all-inclusive price. Part 61 you pay as you go, which can feel more affordable initially, but can creep up on you if you take longer, and most people do. Also, Part 141 programs can have reduced minimum flight hours for certain certificates. Example, you can get your commercial in 190 hours instead of 250, like in Part 61. But that mostly matters if you're on a career track. For the average private pilot, that difference isn't a big factor, since you'll train until proficient regardless. One thing I appreciated about doing both, I got to fly different aircraft. At my local school, I primarily flew Cessna 172s, a high-wing, very common trainer. At ATP, predominantly used Piper Archers, which is a low wing. Switching to the Piper Archer initially threw me off. The sight picture for landing was different. Low wings sit lower relative to the runway, so the perspective changes. The cockpit layout and even how it handles was a little different. I remember my first few landings in the Archer were, let's say, not smooth. I ballooned high a couple of times because the ground effect in a low wing felt way stronger. But after getting used to it, I learned something valuable. Flying different airplanes actually improved my stick and rudder skills and made me a more adaptable pilot. Now I tell students, if you have the chance and budget to try another type of trainer at some point, do it. It broadens your skill set. Don't worry, transitioning between similar class planes, like one single engine airplane to another, isn't too hard. Just takes a few hours to really get the feel. Alright, back to training paths. Neither Part 61 nor 141 is better across the board. It depends on your needs. If you need flexibility and can self-pace, Part 61 is fantastic. If you thrive in a classroom setting with fine structure, or you have a tight timeline, like aiming for an airline career quickly, an academy or Part 141 environment might suit you. Some people also choose hybrid approaches, like doing private locally, then a structured program for your advanced ratings, like I did. There are even university aviation programs where you earn a degree while training. Those are almost always Part 141. One consideration in Part 141 schools, since it's formal, if you struggle on a stage check, you might have to do some extra training and redo the stage check. It can feel a bit like school exams. Part 61 is more like will train until you and the instructor feel you're ready for the check ride, then do the check ride. Neither path is inherently easier or harder, but the feel as a student can differ. Some people like the pressure of stage checks as a good benchmark. Others find it stressful and prefer the continuous evaluation style of Part 61. Also, instructors at big academies sometimes have high student loads and quick turnover. They might be building hours en route to an airline job. At smaller schools, your instructor might stick with you from start to finish over a year or more, and even start to feel like family or friends. That mentorship aspect can be wonderful. I remember at ATP, one of my instructors left for an airline job right after I passed my instrument check ride. It was bittersweet. I was happy for them, but then I got a new instructor midway through my commercial training. In contrast, at my local airport, I had the same instructor almost all the way through my private, and then I did my CFI all with one instructor. I had lasting connections with both of them. It's a different vibe entirely. So what I wish I knew, research and consider your training path options early. If you're aiming for a professional career and have the ability to go full-time, maybe a fast-track academy program is your jam. If you're working or have other commitments and need to go at your own pace, a local school might be better. You can also mix and match. For example, get your private pilots locally and then go to an academy for instrument and commercial, etc. There's no one right way. Importantly, don't let Part 61 or Part 141 thing overwhelm you. At the end of the day, the licenses you get are the same FAA licenses and meet the same standards. I often get asked if airlines prefer one or the other. Not really. They care more about your experience and skill. There are pros and cons to each. One article I read put it nicely. Part 141 is more structured and can be efficient if you follow the program. Part 61 offers flexibility and can be tailored to your needs. I enjoyed experiencing both paths. One last note, whichever path you choose, attitude and effort matter more than anything. I saw people not finish at both types of schools for various reasons. Money, motivation, etc. The program isn't a guarantee. You have to put in the work. But when you find the environment that fits you, it can make the journey smoother. I'm grateful I did the accelerated training, but I'm also glad I had the laid back local training for my foundation. It gave me a nice, balanced perspective. So evaluate what kind of learner you are, what resources you have, and plan accordingly. And if you're already down one path and wondering what about the other, remember, there's always opportunities later to cross-train or broaden your experience. I trained in both low-wing Pipers and high-wing Cessnas. Switching between them taught me to adapt to different aircraft. Each training path or aircraft has its quirks, but the core skills carry over. Number 2, be ready for setbacks, weather, maintenance, just life. Patience is vital. If there's one virtue you cultivate during flight training, let it be patience, because stuff happens. A lot of stuff that's outside of your control will conspire to slow you down, and you have to roll with it. I wish I had been more mentally prepared for the many little setbacks and delays that are just part of aviation. Weather is the big culprit, of course. I quickly learned that Mother Nature doesn't care about your flight training schedule. There were weeks in my training where 3 out of 4 lessons got canceled due to weather. I'm talking low clouds, poor visibility, high winds, thunderstorms, you name it. As a keen student pilot, each cancellation felt like a punch in the gut. I'd drive to the airport all excited only to find the winds had kicked up beyond training limits or a surprise fog bank rolled in. Early on, I'd get pretty down about it. I remember one stretch in the fall when I hadn't flown in like 14 days due to constant rain. I was itching to get back in the air and I worried I was regressing. Eventually, I adapted my mindset. Expect weather delays as a normal part of training. Instead of moping, use that time productively. Back to tip number 8, study more, chair fly, etc. Also, scheduling wise, try to plan for weather. If you live in a place with a rainy season or winter snow, understand that your training might pause or slow down during those periods. If you're on a tight timeline, like trying to finish before college starts or something, factor in buffers for weather days. It's also wise to book more lessons than you think you need in a week, knowing that some will cancel. When I was free, I'd sometimes schedule 3 slots in a week, hoping to fly at least 2. If all 3 happened to go, great. If not, I still hit my target. Another thing, you might wake up to a gorgeous sunny day, drive all the way to the airport, and then the aircraft you were going to fly is down for maintenance. Maybe a tire went flat, or a previous flight reported a weird noise that now needs to be looked at. This happened to me a couple of times. It's frustrating, but safety first. Planes are machines and they require a lot of TLC. So sometimes your lesson will be scrubbed because the plane isn't airworthy at that moment. Or maybe they'll swap you into a different aircraft if available, which, if you're not familiar with it, could mean a mini ground brief to note the differences. Like, oh, this one has a bit of a different avionics setup. It's all part of the game. You start to budget extra time on days you go into the airport just in case things run late or a plane swap happens. Life events can cause setbacks too. Perhaps you get sick and can't fly for a week or 2. Please never fly when you're sick, especially with a cold or ear congestion. That can be dangerous physically, aside from being unproductive. I caught a nasty cold once and had to cancel a couple of lessons until I was 100%. It annoyed me at the time, but flying with a clogged head is a no-go. Ear pain aside, you won't be at your best. Or maybe something like work or family demands pull you away for a while. It's important to prioritize and come back as soon as you can, but also give yourself grace that you're balancing other stuff in life. There could also be personal setbacks. Maybe you had a bad flight that shook your confidence, and you feel reluctant to go up again immediately. That's okay. Acknowledge it, but do get back in the saddle relatively soon with your instructor's support to rebuild that confidence. I had a tough flight once doing short field landings where I just couldn't get it right, and we had a mild bounce that scared me. I went home super upset. My instructor texted me later saying, "Don't worry, next time we'll focus on the basics and you'll get it." I needed that. Next lesson, we went back to normal landings, smoothed those out, then revisited short field, and it clicked. Patience with myself was necessary there. A big part of patience is managing expectations. I had this expectation that I'd progress in a straight line, which ties to number 5. It's not linear. Once I accepted that delays and occasional regressions were normal, I stopped beating myself up or getting frustrated. For example, after a 2-week gap, I'd tell myself, all right, today might be a bit rough as I knock off the rust, and that's fine. By the end of the lesson, I'll be back up to speed. And usually that's what happened. The first takeoff after a break might be a bit shaky, but by the 3rd landing, it's coming back. Here's another tip. Communicate with your instructor during setback. If weather has kept you grounded, maybe do an extra ground session or ask hypothetical questions. So since we can't fly today, can we talk through what we would have done? Or can we dig into a topic I'm curious about? This keeps your head in the game and also helps maintain the student-instructor relationship. In my training, whenever we had a long gap, my CFI would start the next lesson with a comprehensive review to build my confidence and memory. That patience from his side and mine made the rest of the lesson go way smoother. Don't push to jump into something complex right after a break. Ease in. I also learned to control what I could control. You can't control weather, but I can control checking forecasts and scheduling smartly. Can't control maintenance issues, but I can control showing up early to pre-flight so any squawk is caught early and may be fixed or a new plane assigned in time. Can't control an unexpected life event, but I can come back prepared by reviewing notes. Shifting focus to what actions I can take kept me from feeling helpless. Let's not forget, check ride scheduling can be a setback too. Especially in recent times, examiners or DPEs might be booked out weeks, if not months in advance. I finished training and then had to wait a bit to get a check ride slot. It was agony because you're ready and just waiting. I used that time to do a mock check ride and extra practice, but it tested my patience for sure. If you expect that possibility, you can plan for a continuation of training period before the test to keep sharp. And yes, sometimes you might fail a stage check or a written or a maneuver. It's a setback, but view it as temporary. You regroup, fill the gap in knowledge or skill, and try again. Aviation history is full of storied pilots who had hiccups in training. It's how you respond that counts. If you get knocked down, it's how you respond that counts. If you get knocked down, do you get back up? Patience and determination, Yes. I'll share a little mantra that helped me. No flight is wasted. Even the ones that cancel or go badly, there's something to gain. If a flight is canceled, maybe I gained an extra hour to study a tricky topic. If a lesson went poorly, I gained awareness of what to fix. So, in a sense, setbacks are still moving forward if you frame it right. So, the big thing I wish young me knew: be patient and persistent. Flight training is an adventure, and like any adventure, there will be detours and rain delays. Keep your eyes on the prize and don't let the inevitable pauses and backward steps discourage you. You'll get there as long as you keep showing up. And finally, number one, and the biggest tip of all: it's all worth it. The reward at the end and learning never stops. Here we are at the final and the most important thing I wish I had known. It is absolutely unequivocally worth it. Every dollar, every hour, every moment of frustration and fear, it all pays off in ways you can't even imagine just when you're starting out. And perhaps, ironically, getting your pilot certificate isn't the end. It's truly the beginning of a lifelong journey of learning and adventure. When I was struggling through training, maybe after a rough lesson or when my bank account looked scary, I sometimes thought, why am I doing this to myself? If I could have seen a glimpse of what it's like on the other side, it would have eased all doubt. The first time I took family or friends up flying on my own as a newly minted private pilot, the sense of accomplishment and freedom was overwhelming. I was like, wow, I actually did it. I can fly an airplane whenever I want, within the rigs, of course. How cool is that? Those sunset flights just for fun, or popping up above a layer above the clouds into a clear blue sky, it's almost a spiritual experience. You gain a new perspective on the world. It looks very different from 5,000 feet up. You feel like part of an exclusive club, and you've earned your membership with hard work. Flying has also given me confidence and skills beyond aviation. The discipline, the focus, the coolness under pressure, these bleed into your personal and professional life. I handle stressful situations at my non-aviation work much better now because, hey, if I can calmly deal with an engine sputter or unexpected storm, I can handle a tough deadline. The journey of flight training transforms you. Many student pilots, myself included, notice that you become more decisive, responsible, and detail-oriented. You have to. Flying trains you to be that way, and those traits stick. Now, an interesting thing I didn't fully anticipate: once you get your license or rating, that's when the real learning begins. As a student, you often think, I can't wait until I'm done learning this stuff. Newsflash, you're never done learning in aviation. At first that might sound daunting, but it's actually one of the best parts of this field. I've been flying for 6 years and instructing for 2, and I still learn something new on almost every flight. Sometimes it's a little tweak to technique. Sometimes it's a big aha about weather or how to explain a concept better. A private pilot certificate is often called a license to learn, and it's true. It's like getting out of school and into the real world of flying, where you continue to educate yourself. You'll do new things, maybe a fly and pancake breakfast at a distant airport. You'll do mountain flying or flying into Oshkosh with thousands of planes. Talk about intense radio work there. Or maybe transitioning into a more complex or faster airplane. Each new experience adds to your knowledge and keeps you humble. As an instructor, I can say teaching others is an education in itself. You realize how much you don't know when a student asks a question you hadn't thought of. Back to the books I go, and I become a better pilot from it. I also wish I knew how many doors aviation can open. Even if you start just for fun, you might find opportunities pop up. Perhaps you get into $100 hamburger runs, flying to another airport just to eat lunch. Yes, it's a thing. Or volunteering for organizations like Angel Flights to fly patients for medical treatment. Or you decide to pursue advanced ratings like an instrument rating, which makes you an even more precise pilot. Some of my friends who never intended to fly professionally ended up becoming part-time flight instructors just to share their passion or fly for charitable causes. Aviation can be a hobby, a community, a side gig, or a full career, or all of the above at different times of life. For a lot of people, becoming a CFI isn't something that was planned initially, but it turns into one of the most rewarding things you can do. Seeing someone go from zero to solo to licensed pilot under my instruction gives me indescribable pride. It also reinforced for me that all the struggles I went through as a student had a a purpose. I can empathize and guide others now, and I keep paying it forward, which feels amazing. Let's not forget the sheer fun and beauty of flying, which ultimately outweighs the hard times. I've seen sunsets where the sky turns orange, pink, and the horizon stretches infinitely. City lights twinkling on below, all from my little airplane. Just me and the hum of the engine. I've skimmed through cotton candy clouds and felt like I was in a dream. I've taken friends up and watched their faces light up, hearing them say this is unbelievable through the headset. Those moments erase the memory of any tough day I had in training. They also continuously fuel my desire to keep flying and keep learning more. One thing I always tell new pilots at their check ride celebration, aside from congrats, is keep learning and stay curious. Complacency is the enemy of a good pilot, so while yes, learning never stops, that's a feature, not a bug. It means you'll always find new challenges to conquer. Maybe getting that instrument rating, maybe tackling a new type of aircraft, like getting your tail wheel or seaplane for fun, or maybe flying to that bucket list destination. Your pilot license is a ticket to constant adventure and growth. I cannot overemphasize the camaraderie and the pride that comes with being part of the pilot community either. When I earned my private, suddenly I had pilot friends inviting me on trips or saying, hey, come fly my plane with me. And there's this mutual respect, like we both know what it took to get here. You'll join the ranks of people who dared to do something extraordinary. Because let's face it, flying is extraordinary. Not everyone has the courage or dedication to do it, but you will, or you have, and that's something to be immensely proud of. So yes, it's worth it a million times over. On days when you're frustrated, tired, or wondering if you'll ever finish, keep that end goal in sight. Picture yourself on your first flight after getting your license, choosing a nice day, loading a friend or two, and taking off to wherever you want to go. No instructor needed, no more practice required beyond staying current and safe, just flying for the love of it. It's an incredible feeling of freedom and achievement. And after all is said and done, your journey is really just starting. That's something I didn't grasp at first. I thought the check ride was the finish line. In reality, it's like graduation day. You celebrate, sure, but then you step out with a license to explore bigger horizons. Embrace the mindset of continuous learning and improvement, and you'll not only be a better pilot, but you'll find endless enjoyment in this pursuit for years and decades to come. I have some closing thoughts. The reward of all of your training, breathtaking experiences in the sky. The journey may be challenging, but moments like this make it all worthwhile. Every flight is a chance to learn something new and to remember why you fell in love with flying in the first place. Looking back over these 10 things, I sometimes laugh at how naive I was at the beginning. But hey, you don't know what you don't know. The important thing is now you know. You're armed with realistic expectations and insider tips that I hope will make your flight training adventure smoother and more enjoyable. Yes, it will challenge you in ways you didn't expect. You'll have incredible highs, your first takeoff, first solo, earning your certificate, and some lows, financial pains, weather delays, moments of doubt, but stick with it. Every pilot out there has walked this path in their own way, and if they can do it, so can you. Remember, it's okay to ask for help, switch things up, and vent a little when it gets tough. The aviation community is here for you, your instructor, your pilot friends, even online forums or local pilot group. We all want to see you succeed because we all know how awesome it is when you come out the other side. Thank you for hanging out with me through this long video. I truly hope these insights help you on your own journey. If you found this video or podcast valuable, please do me a favor and hit that like button and subscribe or follow. I'd love to have you along for future topics, and if you think this video is relevant to anybody else, share it with them, especially someone that you know is considering starting flight training. Lastly, I'd love to hear from you. What is something that you wish you knew when you started, or something that you're curious or worried about as a new student pilot? One of the fantastic things that I've noticed about the comment sections of these videos is that often it's a bunch of new pilots, and then experienced pilots come in and drop a comment as well. And honestly, your question might even inspire another video or episode. All right, until next time, fly safe, study hard, and enjoy the journey, and I'll see you next week.